Next on Sisterhood of the Second Act.
Uncuffed Voices, Her Story is My Story tells the stories of trailblazing women who rose in the ranks of their respective police departments when very few women were wearing blue. Today on Sisterhood of the Second Act, we'll meet 4 of these women who tell their stories in this best-selling Amazon anthology. Sisterhood of the Second Act continues right after this.
In Bedford County, Virginia, discover local wineries, breweries, cideries, and even a meadery. Each venue has its own unique vibe. Enjoy fun and games, or relax on a spacious deck with mountain views. Download the Bottled in Bedford Craft Beverage Trail map and sample happiness in every pour.
Get your map at bottledinbedford.com.
I'm gonna be an oak tree.
I think I'll be a dogwood tree.
My kids say they be looking for a thorny tree for me.
With Evergreen, you can be a tree. Our biodegradable urn combines your ashes, natural soil additives, and a native tree of your choice. Be a tree and grow for tomorrow.
I want to be a tree.
Learn more at evergreenmemorialtrust.com.
Now from the Fox Radio Roanoke studios, this is Sisterhood of the Second Act. Welcome to Sisterhood of the Second Act. I'm Denise Allen Membrano. For most of her time as Assistant Chief of Police for the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, Chief Chanel Dickerson was the highest-ranking female officer. When she retired, she started Chief Chanel Speaks to empower women to shed their limiting beliefs. Part of that mission included calling on her fellow women in blue to share their stories in the Amazon best-selling book, Uncuffed Voices, Her Story is My Story. And she, as well as 3 of the other authors, join us today to share their stories. Sherry Johnson, Derica Wilson, and Angelica Robinson. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you so much, Denise.
Thank you, Denise.
Well, Chief Chanel, let's just start off with you first. What gave you the inspiration to embark on this project, Uncuffed Voices?
Wow, thank you so much, Denise, for asking that question. It warms my heart every time I'm asked a question because I get to share this vision with the world. As a woman in law enforcement for over 30 years and not having a female mentor to help me navigate through the process, I decided to create Uncuffed Voices, Her Story is My Story, because as women, but particularly as women in law enforcement, we are more alike than different. And I wanted to create a simple yet powerful platform for ladies in law enforcement to share their stories of resilience, strength, and hope with the world. And while doing that, empower other women in the future generation to join law enforcement.
Now, there are 3 other authors of that book with us today. And we started talking to you, I guess, last season, and you told us about this book. For those who don't remember, tell us why you decided to go into law enforcement.
Well, I decided to go into law enforcement as a 9-year-old girl growing up in Danville, Virginia, and there was only one African-American police officer on the police force at that time. I saw how he engaged with the community, and I knew that I wanted to join a profession that sought to help people. And so that started my journey so many years later as a 17-year-old cadet in Washington, D.C. And when I look at my background of poverty, growing up in poverty and abuse, that helped me create the person I am today. I developed compassion, empathy, and I know how to meet people where they are. I know that society lives in a place of unhealed trauma. And so I know how to engage with the community coming from that same place.
Now, you rose to the rank of Assistant Chief of Police in the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. How did you navigate that mostly male system as a woman and a woman of color?
Yeah, it was extremely difficult trying to navigate that system. And as I stated before about not having that sister circle and sisterhood, and that's what I was hoping to bring about through Uncuffed Voices, that I had to navigate that alone, you know, making mistakes along the way and just trying to navigate it as best as possible. But I did it. I did it. And what often happens in police departments is there's only like a small amount of slots, if not just one slot for a woman in law enforcement in certain areas. So what happens is women, we are pitted against each other for that one spot. So we never unify together to know that we all can win. So we're hoping with Uncuffed Voices that it would inspire women to have confidence, to understand that they are good enough and fearlessly and unapologetically go after their dreams.
Now we are talking with Chanel Dickerson, Sherry Johnson, Derica Wilson, as well as Angelica Robinson about Uncuffed Voices. Her story is my story. And Sherry, let's head to you now. When did you decide that you wanted a career in law enforcement?
Well, I began my career in law enforcement. I was a student at Virginia State University, and my professor just happened to be the chief of police at the agency that I currently work. So he would recruit me. He asked me, Sherry, I think you'll do good as being a police officer. Back then in the early 2000s, community policing was really big, especially in our community. It was really small. So, his encouragement. And then I thought about it, being in the military previously, working at the hospital, helping others, not patient care, but just other aspects of working in the hospital. I knew that I can continue my passion of helping others by being a police officer.
Now, I find it amazing you were serving in the Petersburg, Virginia Police Department, that you were the first African-American patrol sergeant there, and this happened relatively recently. I mean, in 2018. Despite your military background and passing all the requirements, what kept you going through that period of time, not getting those promotions?
Again, I just stay focused on my purpose, which is to serve others. I didn't allow that person that I mentioned in my book to take control of my career. My grandmother has always told us, do not let someone stop you from doing something once you put your mind to it. So like Derica, she has, like it says on her shirt, she's the chosen one. I pretty much say I'm on assignment. I make sure I come to work every day intentionally and purposely to be of service to others.
Now, I know, if I remember correctly from the book, as a cadet, he came to speak at your class and said that women weren't supposed to be in law enforcement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is there? So, I mean, that didn't deter you at all?
No, because like I mentioned,
or did it just stoke the fire?
We were the leaders. It's like, how can you say women don't belong in law enforcement? We're the leaders of our class. It was a large class, and I was the president. We had a female from our department who was the chaplain. We had another female who was the secretary. So it's 4 positions in the academy, and 3 of them were occupied by women from our agency. So for him to say that, it's like, I don't think he got the memo. I don't think he understands that we are leaders in law enforcement, and we're currently leading, and we're going to lead in the future. So no, again, my purpose of becoming a police officer was to be of service to others. And I was not going to let his limiting beliefs or his perceptions of what women should or shouldn't do in law enforcement deter me from something that I already put my mind to is what I wanted to do.
Now, Derica, you left college in South Carolina and headed to D.C. to start your law enforcement career. What was the pull that you said, I just got to go do it now?
Well, Denise, and I go back to Sherry when she mentioned her grandmother. My grandmother was a huge inspiration for me. And I knew that I was bigger than South Carolina. I knew that my purpose and passion was elsewhere. And I wanted to start that journey by coming up here to the metropolitan area where you had your pickings of what forces you wanted to join, whether it was local government or federal government. So I found my bearings in the DC area. And, when I moved here, I stayed with a family member. And that was part of one of the reasons why I chose this area, and knowing that I did have, family in the area, but that soon changed quickly with some things that occurred, and which left me basically homeless.
Mhm. I was just going to ask you about that. You didn't go back to South Carolina, though. What kept you going during that time?
Well, this is something that I've come to terms with. It's something that I've never shared. And I wanted to share that experience because I think for me, it's facing my truth. But again, as I mentioned in the very beginning, I was bigger than South Carolina, and I was actually sent here for a reason. And, through speaking to my grandmother, who had gotten diagnosed with cancer when I moved up here, I really wanted to go back home because I felt that I can help her, and I couldn't help her, while I was here. But she had to remind me that, you're there for a reason and you have to see it through. But no one knew what I was dealing with in the background. So I think just my grandmother's words kept me going, but also I knew that there was something bigger. I just didn't know what it was. I was 20 years old, and I just knew that it was something in my heart, in my spirit. And I'm a Southern girl, so I rely heavily on my faith. I walk by faith and not by sight. And I've always been told that you can't question anything. Growing up, you don't question God. I just knew that whatever it was, I just had to be still. And, I also know that anytime there's a breakthrough that's coming, you're going to be faced with challenges.
Challenges, that's a good place to head to Angelica, because I love in the book the way you describe challenges. Tell our listeners and viewers how you describe challenges.
Hi, Denise. Okay, so I describe challenges are the adversities that I have faced, along with the difficulties, the roadblocks. That's how I looked at the challenges that were put in place to stop me from succeeding in my chosen profession.
And you overcame them. Like Chief Chanel, you started as a cadet, but you were in Detroit, correct?
That is correct.
What was it about policing that caught your eye?
Oh, wow. So at a very young age, I would say like around maybe like 13, I would see these at the time they were called rangers at the high schools, and they would have on these police gears from the Detroit Police Department. And I would always see them up at my high schools or the middle schools. They would ride these motorcycles. And I would always, this one specific one his name was Officer French. So I would always go up to him and be messing with his bike, So that's where I took an interest there. And then at around 16, maybe going into 17, I became a junior police cadet for the Detroit Police Department, where I processed juveniles. And I just fell in love with it at that point.
Now, at that point, I know that during your career, you became pregnant, and that, along with several other of the women in the book, created some issues. I want to stick with you after we come back from the break and talk about what it means at that time, what it meant to be pregnant. So we'll be back to continue our discussion with the authors of Uncuffed Voices. Her story is my story, right after this.
I'm gonna be an oak tree.
I think I'll be a dogwood tree.
My kids say they be looking for a thorny tree from me.
With Evergreen, you can be a tree. Our biodegradable urn combines your ashes, natural soil additives, and a native tree of your choice. Be a tree and grow for tomorrow.
I want to be a tree.
Learn more at evergreenmemorialtrust.com.
In Bedford County, Virginia, discover local wineries, breweries, cideries, and even a meadery. Each venue has its own unique vibe. Enjoy fun and games, or relax on a spacious deck with mountain views. Download the Bottled in Bedford Craft Beverage Trail map and sample happiness in every pour.
Get your map at bottledinbedford.com. Once again from the Fox Radio Roanoke Studios, Sisterhood of the Second Act. Welcome back to Sisterhood of the Second Act. I'm Denise Allen Membrano, and we are talking today with four of the authors of Uncuffed Voices, Her Story is My Story: Chanel Dickerson, Sherry Johnson, Derica Wilson, as well as Angelica Robinson. And we left before the break with you, Angelica, and you became pregnant around 2008. What was it like to be pregnant in the police department at that time?
Wow. So when I became pregnant, it was more so you had to hide your pregnancy. Otherwise, you had to go through the repercussions of getting pregnant. And those repercussions was to be released and not given a desk job that, others may have been given. So when I became pregnant, it was, pregnancy is supposed to be, a joyful moment for you to experience. It wasn't like that for me, because I worked for a unit where I was plain clothes. At that time, I was doing crime analysis. And I had confided into someone that I thought, I could trust, share this moment with, only to it to go haywire after that. So it was like, instead of just coming straight out asking me, they, as I stated earlier about the obstacles and the challenges, that's when it started right back up again. So it's like, okay, where you were in a unit where you wear plain clothes, now we're back to uniforms and having to put on the heavy duty belt and all the gear.
Mm-hmm.
So that I got through that part of it. They didn't break me in that area, so they changed my hours from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. to 12 p.m. So now I got to get up extra early, get myself together. I'm sick at the stomach and go into this place miserable. So now it's like, that didn't break me. So now we're going to do these uniform inspections, where they checking everything about you, looking you up and down, making sure your uniform is correct. So it was just like, it was an awful moment, to the point I did break. I was like, look here, I'm pregnant. And like, okay, well, guess what? You can't work.
I was surprised to read that oftentimes officers would have to they would be told to take unpaid leave. And so now you have police officers on WIC and food stamps just to try to make it because you're not getting paid.
Absolutely.
So you joined a lawsuit with 5 other officers.
That is correct.
And this is 2008. What were the results of that lawsuit?
So we teamed up with the ACLU of Michigan, along with a very high-profile law firm, and they challenged the department, and we won that lawsuit. And from there on, I started advocating even more. And in December of that same year of 2008, our governor, who was Governor Granholm at the time, she changed the Pregnancy Act. She had the Pregnancy Act change in the state of Michigan.
It shows what can happen. Like Chief Chanel mentioned earlier about women sticking together, building that sisterhood, being able to support. I think that the pregnancy issue was one of the areas where that any woman who is in corporate America can relate to some of the struggles that you all have faced. How else can this book inspire women in all areas of business and life?
I feel like the book is very empowering for women to unite together because we have so many other challenges that we're facing. Just bringing that unity together, because reading some of the chapters in the book, for me, it was different in law enforcement because although I had some hiccups with the males, most of my hiccups were with the women. Women trying to dim your light, trying to tear you down. So I like to see more unity amongst women. Although I had women attacking me throughout my career or just backstabbing, things of that sort, I still stand and I advocate for them. I don't let whatever is, eating them up in the inside affect me because I know it's something deeper. It's not me. It's something deeper within them that needs to be dealt with. And I'm still going to be here. Be here for them to help them get through it and break whatever it is that's up in them up so their light can shine and not feel intimidated by the next woman, but unite with her.
How to do it? Does anybody else have any ideas of like how you think other women can benefit this book as well? Women in corporate America?
Well, in the workplace, you may experience a them or a they. I mentioned saying they won't pick you or they didn't pick me, but you can't let their limiting beliefs or their negative thinking get in the way of you being the best employee that you can be. If you want to get that promotion, if you want to get that assignment, you can't let someone stand in your way. Like every day I have a thing or someone can just think about it. New day, same focus. Because every day is an opportunity for you to focus on your career goals and to get to where you want to be.
Right. And I know that several of the authors of the book, there are 18 authors, is that right, Chanel?
Yes, it is.
And several of them did grow up including yourself, into low-income areas. How did you all overcome self-limiting beliefs like Sherry was just talking about?
Well, I actually overcame them by a support system. And in my high school at the time, I may not had a mentor in my police career until later, but we had a program in my high school that I was assigned a mentor that lived in a different community. So I got the opportunity to see things. And I always believe it's your experiences and your exposures that shape you into the person that you are. So that's what I credit, like helping me navigate, even family members. And although we lived in low income, if you entered my home and spoke to my mom, you wouldn't think that you were in a low income environment because she always stressed the importance of you're not a product of your environment. This is just your situation at this moment. And so I remember those words. And I sought, the support system and any resources that were available in DC to me at that time. I took that opportunity. And when you think about it, I was a 17-year-old, half a day of high school, half a day at the police academy, making $16,000 a year, right? And so that's huge. That's life-changing. And that's what it did for me.
You look back at those numbers and you think, wow, I'm really rich at that time, right?
You see how I talk about 16,000 now, like I'm looking at that like 16,000. Yes.
So a lot of, I know all of you are facing this male-dominated field. What, that never deterred you? What gave you all the strength to move forward? As you faced, I didn't even get into the discrimination that Derica faced on the job with the picture on your desk. Can you talk about that, Derica? I mean, that is pretty astonishing to me, happening in the 2000s in Falls Church, Virginia.
Yes. So, working for Falls Church, I was the first and only Black female police officer. And I used my voice to also champion change, especially when there were wrongdoings. And I think when I came in my office one day, and it was after speaking up about an issue that wasn't right, there was a picture of a plaque where there was a hanging tree in the city of Falls Church. And I believe that that was placed on my desk to instill fear, to intimidate me, to try to silence me. And as Chanel mentioned earlier, it was difficult. I mean, it was, I was the only Black female police officer, so I had absolutely no one to turn to. There was a few Black male officers, but, being that only Black female and even working different shifts from those that actually look like me. But I refused to back down. I met it head on, and I did not allow it to silence me. In fact, it lit a fire under me to speak out even more, to confront evil. So, there's a lot there. I mean, even when I started just researching the history of Falls Church, because I never thought to research it until, they were deliberately putting things right there on my plate. But again, that male dominating industry, the good old boy network, it was time to tear it down. And, I'm proud to have been a part of that.
Now, I'm going to throw this out to anybody. Who should read this book?
Everybody. Everybody. I think Chanel said it best earlier when she started. She actually said we are more alike than different. And it's not just law enforcement women, it's these issues that we have dealt with. You can see it across all professions, all industries.
And so what do you hope happens? Why did you share your stories, and what did you hope it accomplishes?
Well, for me, I want to, especially within the Detroit Police Department, I want to see more women, standing up for each other, because even today, although the women, they can't be asked about their pregnancies, they're still out there in the streets working up until that 8th month. And, they're just changing their uniforms as their body changes. Not cool at all. They should be given a desk job and still be able to work safely, come to work and be safe. I want to see change. I still want to see the change. And even though we had the change made somewhat, they're still going around little corners to make it difficult for women. But it's just not the men. It's women doing this to other women as well.
I want to thank you all for being with us. That was Angelica Robinson. You also heard from Chanel Dickerson and Sherry Johnson and Derica Wilson. And they are the authors, or 4 of the authors, of Uncuffed Voices. Her Story is My Story. You can get it at Amazon. It's one of their bestsellers, as well as Barnes & Noble. And we'll have a link to their contact information, as well as how you can get the book, on our website in today's show notes at sisterhoodofthesecondact.com. And we'll be back to wrap up the show right after this.
In a region known for its beautiful mountain surroundings, our vibrant arts community makes the Allegheny Highlands a more colorful place to live and visit. Our passion for the arts is endless, and it's uniquely Allegheny.
I want to thank Chanel Dickerson, Sherry Johnson, Derica Wilson, and Angelica Robinson for being with us today. They and the other authors of Uncuffed Voices, Her Story is My Story remind us that even though it may be difficult, speaking out about injustices brings about positive changes and makes life better for us all. I'm Denise Allen Membranio. Join us next week for another edition of Sisterhood of the Second Act.